Yvette.
Thank you. It's lovely to be back, and it's lovely to be here with you this morning. I have a bit of a cold, so I apologize for the frequent coughing that you will experience this morning. So I have this this recurring thing that happens to me at 3 in the morning, which is that I wake up without wanting to. I don't know if this is happening for other people, but the more that I tell people that I've started, it's been going on for about a year. And it used to be 4 in the morning, it's now become 3 in the morning, and I pay attention to these things because I'm sure that there are very wise beings out there who can tell me why I'm waking up fairly consistently at 3 o'clock in the morning in a bit of a freeze state. So I'm waking up distressed, and I track my body right away, and I find out that I'm terrified. I'm waking up in fear. And then, I wake up, and my mind goes into all kinds of very interesting places. One of them is, I should go see a psychiatrist and get some medication. That seems to be one of the cultural thought forms that has gripped Western culture. When we have something distressing that happens, we need to go get some external fix, right? I need to go get a diagnosis, and I need to go back through the DSM, and I need to figure out what this is a symptom of, and then I need to go get it treated. So I noticed that thought coming up, and I usually let that one move on. And then I start tracking, why am I so afraid? Why am I waking up in such a state of fear? What's going on in the collective? What's going on inside of me? What was I dreaming about right before I woke up? And then I began asking myself different questions. And one of them is, what am I being asked to wake up to? And it's the question that I actually want to offer all of you today as we're exploring the theme of conscious commitments. And we're going to unpack a little bit this idea of conscious. What do we really mean? This is a very big word that we use to mean all kinds of things. And then what are the commitments? What things do you find yourself committed to? So we're going to explore that a little bit today. And what I'm hoping to share with you is a framework that I sometimes find helpful for myself when I find myself in a swirl, like I do at 3 in the morning. I found a lot of relief when I began thinking about waking up at 3 a.m. and I took the focus away from, it's 3 a.m. and I need my sleep and I don't want to be awake and this is when I should be sleeping. And, as long as I was in all this resistance with myself, it was actually quite a suffering moment. And then when I took my attention and I went, wait, let's just look at the waking up. And let's just put our attention on, you're waking up. Let's think about all of the different ways in which we can wake up in our lives and in our worlds. And instead of resisting it, judging it, trying to make myself go back to sleep again, which I never have any success with. I don't know if any of you ever do. Forcing myself back into sleep just does not work. But when I surrendered to it, and I began to get up at 3 in the morning, so I'm now both waking up and getting up at 3 in the morning, it's actually an incredibly meditative, spiritual, and productive time for me. And there doesn't really need to be anything wrong. I have realized that I do need to rearrange my waking hours, my traditional waking hours, to allow for napping. But that's an easy fix. So we just make a few schedule changes. And I tell you this story in part because it illustrates for me one of the shifts that happens when we stop living in resistance to life on its terms. And we begin to welcome whatever is arising. And we begin to get creative about all of the things that we think, quote unquote, should be happening, right? You should go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and you should wake up right before your alarm, and then you should be at work during waking hours. And there's a lot of liberation that happens when you start asking, really, but why? I naturally seem to be on the 3, so let's just do that. And I'm really tired at about 10 in the morning. So let's just sleep then. Now, I know that not everybody has the luxury of doing this in their schedule on an instant basis, but I offer you the next question, which is, well, why not? What would it be like if we really chose to live our lives differently? And if we made a commitment to really working with ourselves and with our lives in radically different ways, rather than just inheriting all kinds of cultural strategies that clearly no longer are working. And so that's part of the invitation today, is to look at your own lives and think a little bit about what you could shift up and what you could start getting creative about, and what's causing you some suffering and some distress, and is there another way of living and working with that? So that's what I'm going to be talking about. For those of you who've heard me speak before and have been in rooms with me before, you will already know, but not everybody in this room will know. So I do prefer a backwards and forwards interaction. So if there are questions that come up or there are comments you'd like to make, I do invite people to, stop me. It can be conversational if you like. Otherwise, I can easily talk for far more than the next 30 minutes. So. Also, since there are quite a few new faces in the room that I don't think I know, I was born in South Africa, grew up in Malawi, Germany, back to South Africa, LA. After LA, I did Minnesota, then I did Egypt, then I did England, then I did Arizona, then Bali, and now I'm back. So you can't place the accent. Okay. So. No more energy spent on this. I can't even place the accent some days. When I'm around my South African family, it changes, and then when I go visit my friends in the UK, it changes, and then when I'm back in the States, it changes. So I annoy myself. But once again, I no longer annoy myself. I've learned to enjoy the creativity of how we speak. So here's what I'd like to talk a little bit about today. This idea of consciousness is a very, very big word. And I think we need a little bit of definition of terms, because I was trying to imagine, when people decide to come to a Sunday morning talk on conscious commitments, what are they expecting to hear about? What do they think I'm going to talk about? Because the part of me, the codependent people-pleaser in me, wants, of course, to know what you're all expecting so that I can meet your expectations. And then I always get into trouble because you can never make everybody happy. And then you get super disconnected from your own sense of self, so that I needed to let that thought come and go. Do any of you do this? Do you ever have this where, just checking, right? We have these thought forms that arise. And one of the most liberating things that somebody told me once that I keep going back to is, do not believe what you think. Really, it is one of the most liberating truths, because so many of the things that we think have got nothing to do with who we are. And they have everything to do with what we've experienced and what has happened to us, and the way in which our media puts things out in the airwaves, and the ways in which our families worked ever so many years ago. And we just absorb ways of thinking and being, unconsciously. And so that's sort of the first consciousness, right? It's an unconscious one. We absorb our environments, we absorb our cultures, we absorb our family systems. And we sort of grow up with the first layer of things. I'm arguing with myself, which is why I paused, sorry. Because I actually don't think what I'm about to say is true. I think we come in with blueprints, but let's not go with that first. Let's just go with the psychology part and leave the spiritual part on hold for one moment. We absorb all of these belief systems and cultural norms. And then here's the other question that has been an enduring life mystery for me. And I think there's a problem in the way I frame it, but the best way I can frame it so far is, why do some people wake up? And why do others not? And the reason I have a problem with that framing, even though I'm intrigued by this question, is that I'm not completely convinced that nobody wakes up. So I think the dualism in my question is problematic. However, the smaller self in me does experience people who are awake and conscious that I would evaluate as such, and then those people who are not so awake and not so conscious. Do you have this experience or not? Is that just me? Okay. There seems to be a contrast, which a part of me will question, but we'll put her on hold as well. And we'll ask this question: what are the conditions for waking up? That really intrigues me. Why is it that some people seem to be driven by an innate desire to move into mystery, to move into deep, profound questions, both externally and internally? Why do some people seem to go through life seeking, examining themselves, wanting to know themselves, getting multi-layered? And then I would put myself in that camp. Not everybody might, but I would. And then there are these other people that I interact with who seem to be wholly uninterested in that. And I find them fascinating, like morbidly fascinating. I know. And I always wonder, what does it take to wake them up? And then I have to ask myself, why do you care? Why is it your job to wake anybody up? Leave them alone. So anyway, I'm just giving you some reflections on my own journey and sort of where I'm coming from as I'm exploring some of these questions with you. So what I'd like to give you is a framework. Every framework is a lie, right? We do this fun thing as human beings. We come into this planet and then we come up with all kinds of frameworks and ways of understanding and systems and beliefs, and isn't that fun? And it's fun for me to the degree that you remember that the map is not the territory. But we come up with a lot of maps. And some maps work better than other maps. And so I just want to offer you a map today for understanding a little bit of this journey from unconscious to conscious, and what it might mean to move from an unconscious state of being into a more conscious state of being. And my disclaimer is, this is one framework. It's a window through which you might try to have a look at reality. It doesn't need to be the only one, and it doesn't need to be a quote-unquote true one. But to the degree that it helps you organize some of your own internal experience, and it awakens in you a new way of looking at something that helps you live with a little more integrity and a little more choicefulness, I think it's all good. Does that sound all right to everybody? Okay. So this is a little bit of how I sometimes think about it. It's a frame that I have found useful. I offer it to you to play with. Let it work in your lives in some ways, and then let me know. Let me know what happens. So basically, I personally believe that everything that we are meant to do on the planet is about being in relationship with one another. It's about being in relationship with ourselves, all of ourselves, from the mundane to the spiritual, from the profane to the profound. And finding all of those parts within ourselves and learning to be in relationship with them. And as we are in relationship with all of that within ourselves, we get insight into how to be with one another on the planet in ways that are increasingly conscious and increasingly loving and increasingly life-serving. So that's my bias through which I teach and work. And you should know that, because it'll help you evaluate where you match and where you don't. And because my primary focus is on human relationships, your relationship with yourself, with the divine, and then with other people and their divinity, there seems to be a sort of what I think of as a stage of development. And when I talk about stages of development, I am talking about them hierarchically, but I'm not talking about them in a colonial way. What I mean by development is the development of an acorn into a seedling, into a smaller tree, into a larger tree. I'm talking about the ability to continue to reach for your highest potential, and the increase of movement to your highest potential as you define it is a process of both transcending and including earlier stages of being. It's not a process of getting better than anyone. It is a process of becoming more fully what your inner blueprint prompts you to become in the world. So that's the way that I'm using the word development. And it's a problematic world in our cultures, and so I just want to make sure I'm not talking about things like the developed world being better than the undeveloped world and all kinds of prejudicial concepts like that. So let's put those aside. All right, so we come into the world, and here's a little grid. Some of you have seen this before. And we begin being in relationship, and there are sort of two axes that we begin to learn on. One is my ability to be in connection with you, connection to others. And the other one is my ability to be in connection with myself. Okay? So, excuse me, here I am, little kid, usually in some kind of a network system of human beings that we call a family, and there are many ways that families can look. And I started learning things about what's going on inside of me. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm angry, I want to sleep, I don't want to sleep. And then we learn about things going on outside of me, how everybody else is responding to me as I get in touch with all of my feelings and my needs. So I begin having all kinds of feelings and needs, and then I begin doing my best to express what I'm feeling and needing. It usually begins with some sort of wailing and crying and giggling. Those are our primary initial modes, right, of communicating. And then, depending upon what the people around us do, we learn things about what it means to be in relationship with the world. Either people are going to attend to us, embrace us, meet our needs, get curious about us, be in relationship with us, see us, nurture us, or they don't. And depending upon what happens, you begin to develop all kinds of coping mechanisms to survive this family system or this network of human beings that you happen to have as your primary constellation early on. So some people can really get their attention on orienting to themselves. And I'd like you to think about a really healthy teenager. They are very oriented on connection to self, right? They know what they want, they know what they think, they especially know how it's different from you, the poor adults in the household who lives with them. That's my little bit of self-empathy. And we get very, very good at learning how to advocate for ourselves, right? So we begin to advocate. If I lose connection to myself and you, this can happen in relationships. There's no point in me saying what I want anymore because you can't help me, and it's too painful for me to know all the suffering that I'm in, so I'm going to disconnect from me. We go into freeze states. I sometimes think I wake up in these, I don't know why, but... So right down here we freeze. I'm not connected to you, and I'm not connected to myself. Okay, I'm in a bit of a denial, repressed, dissociated state, frozen up. Not a lot of vitality in that state. Or I learn in my environment that in order to stay safe, in order to get my needs met in my family, that what I need to do is get hyper-vigilant about all of your needs. Okay? Any of you have families like this? I actually need to become acutely attuned to what the people that I am dependent on are feeling and thinking and needing. And I need to change and mold myself to get their approval in order to be safe in this system. Do you recognize this? Okay, I'm just checking. Okay, so here we learn accommodation. Okay, and it's a superpower. That's not how you spell accommodate, but I can't fit it. So I missed some letters intentionally. So we accommodate others. So one thing we learn how to do is we learn how to disconnect a little bit from ourselves and meet other people's needs. The other thing we learn how to do is we'll disconnect from other people's needs. Screw all of you, what about me? Right? And then we advocate for what we want. And sometimes if we're really overwhelmed, we'll disconnect from self and we'll disconnect from other. Okay. So I'm going to draw a little line here. Because when we're stuck in a stress response system, which I'm going to draw here, we think of this as fight, flight, and freeze. Your nervous system kicks in, and your primary way of relating to other people is through old unconscious habits of fight, flight, and freeze. With me? Okay. And then we try to build relationships based upon a stress response, based on defensive coping mechanisms that are not connected to the essence of who you are and are not connected to your conscious higher potential. They are very, very focused on you surviving and being safe. They are focused on self-protection. And they are what they're the way in which I relate with other people when I'm tired and stressed out. I relate with other people defensively. And when I'm relating defensively, today I'm going to use that as unconsciously. Okay? Any questions on this piece before I dive on? Is this making sense to people so far? I'm just wanting to check. Okay. So down here, what we have is the world of dualism. We learn about relationships through either me or you. Either I get what I want or you get what you want. Either you are with us or you are against us. We have fear-based consciousness as one of the primary ways in which we try to do relationships with ourselves and others. And so underneath this line, I'm going to talk about this for a moment. We are fear-based. We see an increase in anger. We see a lot of guilt. We do a lot of shame and blame. Okay? And the primary relational strategy that we use to try and make things better is some version of control. So what we learn in what we're going to just call for ease today, first consciousness in relationships, what we learn is about the mechanics of power over other people and being in positions of dependence and power under other people. And for most people, that is as far as the puzzle of human relationships seems to go. And what a lot of people want to do is rearrange the pieces. I'm afraid of other people, so I need to control them in some way. And the only way that I can get safe is to have power over other people, control them, and make them do what I think is quote-unquote right. Okay? And then we get really stuck in a lot of ideas down here about what is right and what is wrong, and who is good and who is bad. And then we throw on top of all of this a lot of punitive systems of justice, where we begin to believe that the best way to make the world better, the best method for teaching people how to be quote-unquote good, whatever that means, is to make them suffer. You need to be punished if you don't behave in a way that I like. And then you'll feel bad. And it's good that you feel bad because then you'll learn. Hopefully none of you had families like this. Okay? Our justice system is founded on a punitive sense of justice and this idea that people learn best through suffering. And so then this is how we do relationships. Fight, flight, freeze. Fear-based, controlling, self-protective, defensive, and very, very unhappy. So a lot of unhappiness down here. And then our relational way of being is blame and shame. Because what we do in this consciousness, the way that we think we're going to help the world, is by letting everybody else know what is wrong with them and then helping them fix it. Which is a consciousness that I'd invite you to begin questioning. I don't believe that that really works. So then we move, we learn all about becoming good accommodators, hopefully become very good at becoming good advocators. Here you learn the superpower of disengagement when you're overwhelmed. So I want you to reframe these as actually positive and useful tools that you develop in order to survive in certain consciousness streams in this world. You want to know how to fight for yourself. You also need to know how to put yourself aside for the needs of other people. And you also need to know when it is better to disengage from a situation and come back to it more resourced later. These are good tools. We all need to learn them. They're not bad. But I would invite you not to stall out there, because I think this is where most people stall out. They think that's all there is. Okay? Then we come, have any of you read David Hawkins' work on power versus force? Are you familiar with the consciousness scale? Okay, I was hoping that I wouldn't have to talk too much about that. So down here we have death. And as we go up the consciousness scale, I don't have these in the right order, I realize anger is right below courage. But here's the courage line that David Hawkins talks about. Okay? And it's at the vibration of about 200 where we begin to shift from a taking consciousness, a downward spiral where we're zapping energy from the world around us. And we move, when we hit 200, into a different way of being, a different consciousness in which we're actually contributing. And if you want to know more about some of his theories and some of his research, you can certainly go and read his books, but I'm not going to go into that too much. I just want to map it onto how I see it synthesizing with this model. Here we get courage, and what we begin to do is we begin to start reclaiming all of the parts of who we are. I can accommodate, but I don't have to. I can advocate, but I don't have to. I can disengage, but I don't have to. I start living from a place that is no longer fear-based, that is actually, well, I'm going to shortcut it, but is love-based. That is no longer avoiding suffering, but that instead figures out a way in which I am in relationship with suffering. I can sit with suffering in a way, once I've moved up here, I learn how to sit with suffering in a way that I'm no longer controlled by my knee-jerk avoidance of pain or suffering or discomfort. I begin developing some capacity as a spiritual being, as an empowered being, as a conscious being, as a choiceful being. I am no longer a victim of everything that has happened to me. I'm not a victim of the systems. I am not a victim of the thought forms that arise within me. Nor do I take my suffering like I might do down here and try to pass it on to other people through power over tactics. I take the suffering of my life and it transforms within me. I do something different with it than what I might do in this bottom triangle. I open up my heart and I face myself and my life and everything that is arising with courage, with openness, with a willingness to look. And what I do is I begin having a different relationship with everything that I find below this line. Instead of judging all of this, instead of living in resistance to it, instead of seeing it as something bad and wrong, who was it Thich Nhat Hanh who talks about the mud that the lotus rises out of? So here's our mud, okay? I start seeing it as the rich compost that it is for our development into love if we choose to do that. And we begin to harness the power of choosing. We get aware of the things that we have come out of. We look at the world that we grew up in. And with awareness, we become conscious co-creators of where we want to go next. I am so tired of hearing people tell me things like, that's not the way the world is. I'm tired of it, only because, obviously, I know. And so what? So what? That's not the way the world is, but it's how I'd like the world to be. And so I'm going to do whatever I can inside of me to serve the world I want to live in. Because I really do not personally like the way the world is. And I'm not willing to settle for this. I'm not willing to settle for the world the way it is on its terms. And I'm not willing to judge it. And the only thing that I can find in myself that makes any sense to me is finding a way to love it. And so, what do I need to do inside of myself to harvest everything that is good that came out of this? Every self-advocacy, compromising, disengaging tool that I have in relationship. And how do I begin using all of this good stuff to serve something different? So when we start moving up here, up this part of the courage line, what we come up here is we come to joy and enlightenment and love. And this journey, this is going to get very complicated, I hope you can follow with me. This journey is about finding your shared humanity with every other human being on this planet. It's about finding the narcissist within you. It's about finding the part of you that is self-entitled and predatory and vicious and enjoys making other people suffer. And it's about making peace with that part of yourself. It's about finding the people pleaser in you and the person in you who's so dependent on everybody else's positive judgment of you that it controls your sense of integrity and it makes you show up not true to who you really want to be, not true to what is really percolating inside of your heart and soul. It is the parts of you that still have sway over you because you become afraid. And it is about loving up every single part of you that you find, so that when you interact with other people on this planet who are operating from that place, that you can be with them in a loving way, as opposed to judging them, blaming them, shaming them, controlling them, fixing them, and wasting your life energy in other people's business. It is about reclaiming your power and putting it back into you becoming what it is that you would like to see more of in the world. Loving beings in relationship with one another who are serving a massive paradigm shift on this planet that is sorely needed. Sorely needed. And we will not make this shift as long as we can only operate out of shame and blame and fearful consciousness down here. And the places where we are being asked to practice is in the intimate family relationships of your lives with that aunt or uncle or brother or sister or parent or child that drives you nuts. Because let me tell you, if you can't do it there, we're screwed. Do you get it? And you have got more than enough people in your personal lives that cause you trouble. Stop worrying about what's happening in Washington. You can't do anything. Your plate is full with your own lives right now. It is your relationship with yourself that needs some examining, and it is the relationships with the people that you directly influence on a daily basis that is your training ground. And what we begin doing is very particular conscious practices. 1, you have choice in every single moment. In every moment, you are choosing to respond to people out of fear and control, or out of working with, deeply knowing, loving up, understanding, and sitting with. You have the choice to numb out from your pain, or to sit with it and find out what message it is carrying, what truth it is bringing into your life that you have been avoiding. When we won't look at something for long enough, when we keep turning away, I don't want to know this yet. Maybe none of you do this. I do this so much. I have these truths that come up in my life and I'm like, oh yeah, not yet. Because if I see this truth, then something in my life has to change. And so I want to slow down the rate of change. Just slow down the rate of change, not ready for this truth to work its way. And then you know what happens? I begin waking up at 3 a.m. Because life has its way of saying, you will wake up. You will wake up. It's just a question of when and how. I like to believe that anyway, and then I look at all these other people who don't wake up and I'm like, really? How do they get away with it? Because I can't seem to do this. Up here, we stay choiceful. We stay courageous. You let the pain of your life break your heart open instead of making you brittle and defended and fearful and little. You take more risks. You try things out. You begin to live with a lot more integrity. You recognize up here that everything that I find in me is not something to be judged or cut out like a cancer. It is actually something to be embraced, to know, to immerse and reclaim. This is where shadow work can be very, very important to be doing. You reclaim all of the parts of yourself. And why would we rather do that than try to cut them out? Because it enables us to be in relationship with one another differently, where we don't have to cut anybody out, where there is room for everybody on this planet, all ways of being, all ways of thinking, and our job is to learn how to be in relationship with ourselves and them in a loving way. I don't know what happens next, but let's just get there, and then we can all collectively figure out what happens next. I imagine there's something good, but we can't even get there. So that's where my focus is today. Up here, we move into the realm of power with relationships based in love, based in choice, based in commitment to honor the inner truths that are arising in each person's spirit and in each person's blueprint, that you have an intuitive and lifelong knowing. You have a drive in you of a potential that you are wanting to reach. There is a knowing in you. You may want to keep turning that volume down so that you don't have to listen to this inconvenient voice, because it might mean that you start working at 3 in the morning instead of 10 in the morning, you start napping, and this is not fit our cultural norm. But you begin to work with life on its terms, and you begin to work with people on their terms, and you begin to open, and you begin to expand, and you begin to stay choiceful. And then you begin to make commitments to serving that which brings us alive, that which increases vitality, that which increases love and our capacity to be loving with one another. Down here, beneath the courage line, we are enacting fate. Okay, this is the karmic wheel down here. Everything just happened to you. There's nothing you can do about it. Don't get conscious. Don't get aware. And then I tell you what, your life is going to play a very predictable script and then you'll die. I see this all the time. You don't have to wake up. You don't have to get conscious. You can choose to live a life run by fear, run by anger, run by power, run by control. And indeed, when I look out there, it looks like many people are choosing this. Many people are choosing it because they're not aware there's another choice. Unfortunately, the bad news is that as of right now, you are all aware that there is a choice. And so denial is no longer an option. Now it's simply a choice, okay? And the choice is to make the commitment to becoming courageous, to becoming more expanded, to sitting with pain differently, to allowing truths to percolate up, to begin getting co-creative in your lives, and to begin asking yourself the question, who am I really? And the answer to that question is one that is infused with humility. Because we all suck. We really do. Human beings suck. I say this all the time. People really, really suck, and I work with a lot of people, and they really suck. And I really love them. I really do. We do fearful, controlling, punitive, shaming, defensive things to one another all the time. And we keep unconsciously hurting each other. I was in a relationship once, I'll give you this example quickly. I was in this relationship in my older selves I can tell you about the shameful parts of me from long ago because they're neutralized. I can't tell you about the ones I'm still grappling with because I'll feel too much shame. So, an older one. I was in a relationship. I grew up with fairy tales, right? So I had internalized that as a woman, you're supposed to be like Cinderella, right? Oh dear, I sleep by a fireplace until a prince shows up. And then I live in a castle and I'm entitled now to happiness. So I had this script unconsciously absorbed inside of me. And I was trying to get out of a relationship with a, wealthy man who was supposed to be the prince, who. Now, we don't know this consciously. Do you know that? It's not like you consciously know you've absorbed this stuff and then you buy into it with a choice and then you live out of it. They happen. It's like you discover with horror the things you've internalized when you start looking at the consequences in your life. Does that resonate with anybody? You begin looking at how your life is going, and then you say, but why? Why is it happening like this? Why are these patterns? And then you're like, so now I'm in this relationship, and I don't want to leave, and I don't want to leave, and I really want to leave because I know that it's just not good for me. And I'm so unhappy. But I have this like addictive quality that I just can't leave. I'm sure none of you ever have this experience. And so then you grapple with, what's wrong with me? I know better. And it wasn't until a friend of mine said, well, let's sit in that question. What is it? What is it? I'm like, I don't know. It's just such a mystery to me. I don't know why I keep going back, and I don't know, right? And this is what you hear when I'm still down here. I don't know. And then he said, what's your best guess? Like, if the worst truth were true, like, what would be the worst possible reason that you're staying? And I said, the worst possible reason is that he's my security blanket. He's like if nothing else works out, I can go back. And in that moment, I knew. And it was a truth that I wasn't willing to face. The part of me that would use somebody in that way. Because I have so much judgment of that needy, dependent, disgusting, I don't want to, that's not me. And so I just want to let you know, every time you have a not me, slow down. Because when I saw that in that moment, and I was like, holy, I'm doing that, but I'm doing it unconsciously. And in that moment, that I was willing to own it and see that in me, the next trick is not to judge it. The next trick is to develop incredible compassion for the shitty things we've inherited. Okay? And to then say, okay, that's what has had power over me. That's had power over me. And now that I'm willing to name it, it no longer has power. Now I can choose. But it does take a tremendous amount of grapple. It does take the willingness to move up into a place where I will not use other people. I will not be used by other people. I am not here to be used, and I am not here to exploit you. I am here to be in relationship with you as a loving being, to know you, to know myself, to embody relationships from a power with perspective that serves our highest collective potential and serves a shift that I'd like to see on the planet, which is one in which we move out of fear and into more loving ways of being with one another. And once we know ourselves, we can begin making conscious commitments. If you don't know yourself, your commitments are not conscious. They are running you. And so the slowing down and being willing to really get honest with yourself in a compassionate and loving way is primary to getting choice back in your life, to getting power back in your life, and to being able to be co-creators of the kind of world and relationships that you would like to be. And we do it in community, because none of us are doing this alone. So that's what I want to leave with you for today, and then I'm going to hand it over to Tina. Thank you. I wrote a poem for you today by David White called Everything is Waiting for You. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witness to the tiny, hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely, even you, at times, have felt the grand array, the swelling presence, and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And the tiny speaker in the phone is your dream letter to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and see the good in you at last. All the birds and the creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. Happy spring.